Welcome back to Mr. Sturgeon's classroom. Today we are going to be covering lesson 2.2, arguments for and against ratification of our Constitution. So what we're really going to be focusing on are the two groups who were kind of at odds during our founding of the country, the Federalists and the anti-federalists. Now, just to recap of the Federalists wanted that strong national government. They believed a strong government could protect the people, and they supported our new Constitution. The anti-federalists, basically just think the opposite. They believed that we need a strong state government or strong individual rights that allow us to kind of govern ourselves. Federalists are more the elite, the aristocracy, and then anti-federalists are more kind of like the farmers, the traders, the people who were more seen as the commoner, I guess you could say. Now, they believe the Constitution drained way too much power away from the states. They thought the Constitution gave too much power to the national government and that the government would never give it back. And so they supported more of an edited articles, not necessarily this new Constitution that was being brought up in the Continental Congress. Now, we're going to be focusing on the Federalist Papers for the Federalists, and then we're going to be focusing on Brutus I for the Anti-Federalists. The reason we're going to be focusing on those documents are those are the ones that always show up on the AP Government and Politics exam. Obviously, yes, more could show up, but more often than not, these are the documents that you will see somewhere on the AP Government exam. So we're going to go into the first document. Now, these are the Federalist Papers. Now, you may remember these from the musical Hamilton, but here are a few of them. And essentially what they were essays that were written by Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay, and they were supporting our Constitution. So what you need to remember is the Federalist Papers were supported by the Federalists, and they were supporting a strong national government and a new Constitution. So one of the essays, I group these into the most important essays to know. You're going to have Federalist Paper number 10. And what this one said was that this new government that we are trying to create is very important. This new Constitution is good because it protects people from a faction's influence. And what I mean by faction, it can be a group, it can be a person, it can be a political party. But what it did was it said factions are naturally bad. Having groups kind of all want one thing is bad. And those groups can maybe try to influence you to vote one way or another. And you might not know what you're voting for. You might just trying to, see which one is best, and you're persuaded one direction or the other by these factions. And what the Federalist Paper number 10 did is it said factions are bad, and that this new representative democracy was a way to protect the people. It creates a trust in the government, and it's a way to have a strong national government that isn't influenced by these factions. It's not influenced or persuaded by a group wanting you to do one thing or the other. So Federalist Paper number 10, if you ever get this on the AP exam, it will probably have an excerpt, but the main idea behind it was we need a new Constitution. We want this representative democracy we've planned, because it's going to protect us from these factions, these groups who are going to try to persuade us or try to maybe give us misinformation and try to have us vote one way or the other. So we're going to be protected by this new Constitution. That was just one argument. Probably the most important Federalist Paper in my mind, and I bet many other history teachers' minds, is Federalist Paper 51. This Federalist Paper basically broke down what the new government was going to look like. And what it said was this new government, this new Constitution that we're making, it prevents a tyrannical government. It's going to protect us from another King George. It's going to protect us from a person like a dictator. And the reason it's going to protect us is because powers are divided amongst the branches. This new Constitution is divided into 3 branches of government. And each branch is not superior to the other. Even though the legislative branch comes first, technically it's not more superior than the judicial branch. It does say the legislative branch is the closest to the people because we really do elect our representatives. But what it really broke down is that we are protected because of these checks and balances. These ways where one branch can check another branch if it's maybe abusing its power. So we can check the president through the judicial branch, through the legislative branch, and it prevents a tyrannical government from ever occurring. And it's really going to protect the minority, as in really the people, from this tyrannical government. So Federalist Paper number 51, it's about checks and balances, probably the most important Federalist paper. And it basically broke down that we need this new constitution, this new government, because it's going to protect us from a tyrannical government. That's Federalist Paper 51. Now, you're going to have two more Federalist Papers we're going to cover. One is Federalist Paper 70. Now, Federalist Paper 70 is written by Alexander Hamilton, and it's talking about we need this new government because it's only going to have one man chief as the executive. And he probably really did mean just one man. At the time, they weren't very progressive when it came to women in politics. But what it said was we are going to have one president, and that's going to be very easy for the people to check because we're only watching one person. We're only watching that one president. Some of the other ideas were maybe we have 3 presidents, maybe we have 7 presidents. He said, no, we need this new constitution because it's only going to have one. And it's going to be easy to check. And also, if you think about it, imagine if we had 2 presidents. Imagine if Trump and Obama were in the White House at the same time. They probably would just argue with one another. And nothing would get done because they're just always arguing. Yes, they might compromise, just like we did with the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan, but they might not. And so what he said was we need this new government because we are only going to have one president. And they're going to be easily checked by the people. And if we had any more than one, we would just get into more arguments. So that was Federalist Paper 70. Now, the last Federalist paper we are going to cover is Federalist 78. And this one pertains to the judicial branch. So if you look at it, we already have the judicial branch here. We have the executive branch for 70. And let's just say 51, it's all 3 branches, but it also talks about the legislative branch. So you have the 3 branches of government being talked about in these Federalist papers. Now, Federalist Paper 78 said that this judicial branch that's going to be created is going to be independent of the legislative and executive branches. Now, that's very important because up until this point in most governments around the world, the courts were whoever was running the country. So like for Great Britain, King George was pretty much the court. If he said you were guilty, you would be guilty. But what they said is this new judicial branch is going to be completely independent from the other 2 branches. It's not going to be influenced. It's not going to be persuaded by either branch. And the reason this is very important is because it protects the other people from those branches. So these people are protected by the judicial branch because they know it's not going to be influenced by the other 2. And this judicial branch will also have something, it wasn't known as this yet, but as judicial review. And judicial review is the ability for the judicial branch to check any action by the legislative branch or the executive branch and say, you can't do that. So, for example, let's just say Trump banning people from certain countries. The judicial branch may step in and say, you know what, that's illegal. You can't do that, President Trump. So you need to take that order away. And they can do the same thing with the legislative branch. Let's say the legislative branch tries to pass a law, but that law is breaking the Constitution, something in the Constitution. The judicial branch can then say, you know what, you need to take back this law. It cannot happen because it's going against the Constitution. So that's a very important power that the judicial branch has. Not only is it independent, but it can check the other 2 branches as well. Now, the Anti-federalists, they weren't as organized as the Federalists, so they didn't have as many essays, but they had one very important one. It was called Brutus I. Brutus I was another kind of essay that was written for the Anti-Federalists. And this Brutus I said, we do not need this constitution. We do not want this new government. So it was a counter-argument. And what it said was it was preferring the Articles and a confederation of states, kind of like we already had, where New Jersey and New York were very much independent and sovereign from one another. It also said that we don't need a national government, or at least a strong national government. What they said was, this new constitution is very vague. There's very vague phrasing. And this vague phrasing could be abused by a strong national government. So think of the times where, you're asked where you're going and you say, oh, I'm going out. Well, out could be anywhere. And that's kind of what they were arguing. They're saying this new constitution, it's super vague. The government could just step in and say, oh, that's exactly what I meant when I said the right to bear arms. So they said that this new constitution, it's too vague and that a government could easily abuse what they said in the document. They also said that states lose all their power. They said that the national government is taking most of the power away from the states, and the states are really left with nothing. So if a state wanted to push back against the national government, it probably couldn't with this new constitution. And then lastly, and this is going to be Thomas Hobbes, this is going to be most anti-federalist belief. This is probably their key argument in a new government, is they feared that a tyrant would rule again. They feared this new constitution, this new government was going to rule with an iron fist because they were given so much power, and that the elite would just rule us again with this representative democracy. That they thought that the senators, the House of Reps, the judges, the president, they thought, yeah, we might be able to elect a few of them, but regardless, it's still going to be the elite that rule us. And they're just going to be like the British were before Declaration of Independence. And so that was their main arguments in Brutus I, and kind of main arguments overall against this new constitution. So Brutus I, the counter argument to the Federalist Papers. Now, in the next lesson, we are finally going to dive into the Constitution. So I'm going to break down the Constitution, each article, and we're actually going to focus on the first 3 articles of the Constitution for the next unit. So thank you and enjoy.